Narék Sahakyan is a researcher in the assessment department at WIDA, which is also housed at the University of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. And he has a background in mathematical models, applied economics, and educational leadership and policy analysis. Narek's research interests are at the intersection of student assessment of multilingual learners, educational policy. Narek leads the WIDA Research Subcommittee, which is a rotating group of SEAs, the State Educational Agency representatives from the various WIDA states that guides the research agenda at WIDA. And Narek also collaborates with the Departments of Education across all of these states, providing guidance and technical assistance to staff in state educational agencies on state, district, and school accountability models, and offer guidance in examining policies on English learner identification, assessment, and reclassification. He's one of the smartest people I know and one of the kindest people that I know. But what I love about his work is that he always centers social justice. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Welcome, Narék.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mariano. Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can share my screen. Does that work?
Coming. There it is.
All right, perfect. Oops. There we go. All right. So for the next half hour to 40 minutes, I'll be talking to you about examining multilingual learners' proficiency on standardized assessments. I'll talk to you about some trends and disparities across the WIDA consortium. There's a lot of material that I will present to you today. I hope to cover most of it. I probably won't have time to cover all of it, but let's see how this goes. All right. So just a quick agenda. We'll do some introductions. Mariano already did a lot of that. A little bit of background on WIDA's multilingual learners, English learners. I'll share some data on WIDA reports on EL testing, proficiency, and growth before and after, in quotations, the COVID-19 pandemic. The specific research questions that I'll talk about. I'll share a little bit of the literature that I've reviewed, go over the theoretical framework and the conceptual model, talk about the data that underlies this analysis, just a little bit about the statistical models. I'll talk about the main findings, go over some implications, limitations, future research, and hopefully we'll have the last 15 minutes for some questions that I can field for you. All right, Mariano went over some of this already. My background is in math, economics, and statistics. I've been at the UW for quite a while now. Since 2005 is when I moved to Madison from Armenia for graduate school. It was my second encounter with the American Midwest. I've also been an exchange student back in 1996, 97 in Minnesota for an academic year. After moving to Wisconsin to Madison in 2005, after finishing my master's, I started working at WIDA as a researcher. My work at WIDA is mostly on quantitative methods, statistical models. I conduct applied analysis on issues relating to multilingual learners' educational policy and assessment. That's me. Before we get into the main content, I just want to very quickly talk about the terminology that I'll use. The terms that are used in the landscape of multilingual learner education have been widely scrutinized, acknowledging that some of these labels, such as English learner, long-term English learner, limited English proficient, are in essence deficit-minded and can further stigmatize students who are still honing their multilingual skills. There has been a gradual and welcome shift in the literature and also in the field to more asset-based terms such as multilingual learners, dual language learners, emergent bilinguals, plurilingual learners. In spirit, I agree with all of these framings, more asset-based framings, but in this work, I emphasize and I use officially designated terms such as English learner and long-term English learner to emphasize the fact that the definition and the implementation of these student categories is deeply rooted in federal and state legislation. Further, the terminology is perhaps more aligned and appropriate for the analysis that I'll be presenting, because the data that I will present today is exclusively based on those students who were identified as English learners and are taking the WIDA standardized English language assessment as stipulated by federal law. So it seems more appropriate to talk about them in that framing. So the purpose of identification as a multilingual learner it rests in the federal government's promise to provide supplemental, not substitutional supports to ensure a quality and equitable education. States, districts, and schools receive additional federal funds, which typically end up being very short of what is needed to provide a quality language instructional educational program with the resources that are needed to teach these youth academic English and to ultimately enable them to thrive in American classrooms. But in addition to being severely underfunded, these programs usually, or a lot of the time, end up being substitutional and inadequate. There is a lot of evidence, a lot of research on the field that talks about English learners being pulled out of regular instruction, having limited access to full curricular and high-level courses, being subject to lower expectation and being tracked to lower academic trajectories. However, there is also evidence that when multilingual learners of English are provided with high quality services, linguistic supports, they excel academically. There is evidence that former ELs outperform their never EL peers on standardized assessments, and there is a lot of research that shows longer term benefits of bilingualism, multilingualism. So therefore, in addition to providing a quality education to these youth, it is important to assure both the accurate identification, but also the timely exit or graduation from English language support programs for these students. And this is where WIDA comes in. So what you were seeing on your screen, I'm sorry about that misalignment in the bottom, but what you're seeing on the screen is a current map of the WIDA consortium adopted from the WIDA website, not very successfully, as you can see. It's a collection. Right now, WIDA has 41 or 42 states and or territories, including the ones that are listed below the big map. This is the entire consortium. In addition to providing a system of standards, professional development and research, of which I'm a small part of, WIDA provides a high-quality, multimodal English language assessment called Access for ELs to about 2 million English language learners annually across the nation from these 42 different states and territories. The scores that students receive that are part of the WIDA consortium are a substantial part of the determination whether the student will need additional language services in the upcoming academic year or whether they should be reclassified. And I'll talk a little more about the assessment. So Access for ELs Online is a computer-based adaptive test. The purpose is to measure achievement. The audience is grades through to grades 1 through 12. In the kindergarten, there is the paper version that's being administered. The format is online. There are 2 types of scores reported, scale scores and proficiency levels. There are 4 domains that the Access test measures students' linguistic ability, English language proficiency in. reading, listening, speaking, and writing. It's a very rigorous test, altogether about 260 minutes total. But on the upside is it provides reliable and consistent and precise information on English learners' proficiency levels at the end of the academic school year when they're usually tested. A little earlier, but it's an annual high stakes assessment, and again, based on the scores that the students receive on this assessment, reclassification decisions are made which affect whether the student will be an English learner or not in the upcoming school year. So all of the students that take the WIDA assessment receive an individual student score report. This is what it looks like. Right now we're doing a redesign. It will look different in the coming years, but this is what it looks like right now. You see the 4 different domains: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and then 3 composite domains: oral language, literacy, and comprehension, and overall listed in the very bottom. Again, we provide 2 types of scores: proficiency levels and scale scores. Today I will talk mostly about scale scores, and I will talk about overall composite scale scores, the thing that's highlighted in the bottom right of your screen. As you can see, scale scores range from 100 to 600. So this particular student had received an overall composite scale score of 329 as determined by a weighted average of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this is computed as a weighted average of 35% reading, 35% writing, 15% listening, and 15% speaking. So again, this overall composite scale score and the associated proficiency level, 3.4 in this case, is a large part of a data point that is considered in making determinations whether a student should be reclassified from English learner status after the academic year. All right, let's move forward. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was a lot of evidence coming out, even in the earlier stages, of a large and detrimental impact of the pandemic on English learner students specifically, WIDA started putting out some data to examine what is going on across the WIDA consortium. We've done 3 reports so far with my colleague Glenn Poole. This is what you're seeing on your screen, and I've asked Amanda to share a link to this. Is the 3rd report that we've put together since the start of the pandemic. This came out last year. It is basically a descriptive account of the patterns, the trends in the last 6 or 7 academic years now, going all the way back to 2018, following up students, the entire population of students from 2018 to 2024, and looking at what the testing, proficiency, and average growth has looked like, both overall for the WIDA consortium, but also by grade level cluster. And in the latest report, we've also started looking at disparities, differences across or within English learner subgroups, specifically juxtaposing outcomes for Hispanic versus non-Hispanic identified English learners. So this is the descriptive part of the report, and this is a report that's in the works. We're working on the 4th report right now that will include the 2024 data, 2023-24 data in the analysis. And I'll share a couple of slides that already include this data in the next coming slides, just to see where we are at. So in this and in the next couple of slides, I'll show a couple of bar charts. This one focuses on English learner testing from 2018 to 2024. Again, what you're seeing is the entire WIDA consortium. On the right-hand side, in the upper corner, you see the N sizes. You can see it increases from 1.3 million, about 1.4 million in 2018, all the way to up to almost 2 million students in 2024. We're in these reports, we're breaking out English learners' performance by grade level cluster. So you can see early elementary, late elementary, middle school, and high school listed on the x-axis. The first three bars that are shown in blue, different shades of blue, show the pre-pandemic years of 2018, 2019, and 2020. And you can see a light colored bar that's lower that shows the 2021 outcome. This is the year where we were able to test only 70%, about 70% of the EL population due to the ongoing pandemic. And then the three green bars that follow are the post-pandemic years. And you can see from the increasing trend in the green bars, there is more and more students that are a part of the WIDA consortium that are being tested. Oh, I should also say that the composition of WIDA states has not changed or has changed minimally since the beginning of the pandemic in the sample that we're looking at. So the increases in the numbers of tested students are not due to new states joining the WIDA consortium. It is just demographic trends of new kids, English learner kids joining not joining the consortium, but becoming an English learner and starting to take the WIDA test in states where that are part of the WIDA consortium. Okay, so moving forward, what you see on your screen is the average proficiency of the entire population, again shown by year, 2018 all the way to 2024. 2024 has just been updated about 2 weeks ago. Again, we're working on the official report that should be out in a month or so that will include these figures. But again, what you're seeing, the blue bars pre-pandemic proficiency, the green bars post-pandemic proficiency, and the darkest green bar showing the latest, the 2024, 23, 24 result. And you can see for all grade level clusters, the latest estimate is a little below, except for the high school, where it's just one scale score above the previous year's estimate. So this is pretty telling evidence, even though we're just looking at average scale scores. It's just descriptive statistics, but we are looking at the entire population of the consortium, and we're talking about millions of students. So these trends are pretty telling of both an impact of a pandemic, that you can see a pretty sharp drop after the 2020 year, and also the fact that these declines are still going on 4 years after the pandemic. One more slide I'll show you before we get into more fun stuff, more inferential analysis. This shows WIDA's English learners' growth. And when I say growth here, I mean the gain in scale scores from 1 year to the next. So the 2019 estimate, for example, for early elementary of 43, that means that from 2018 to 2019, kids who were in the elementary grade level cluster reported about an average overall composite scale score gain of 43 points. You can see that growth numbers are a little different compared to proficiency numbers. There isn't such a sharp decline, but again, growth is a little bit different. You can see this zigzag type of pattern in years when there is high growth. In the next year, you can see low growth, high growth, again, low growth. Basically showing that there have not been large changes. There has been a drop after the pandemic from 44 to 39, but then we've seemed to caught up in the earlier elementary cluster to 47, 52, then 50. Not so much in the late elementary, middle school, and high school clusters. Again, these charts and a lot more, not just on overall composite proficiency, but also on reading, listening, writing, and speaking, as well as the other domains, will be presented as part of the report that is in the works. So you'll be able to take a look at this evidence at much closer detail. All right, where are we at? Slide 4. Let's move forward. I've mentioned that something we started to do in the last report and we'll keep doing is examining differences in overall proficiency within the English learner subgroup. So what you see on your screen are the disparities or differences in average scale scores between Hispanic and non-Hispanic identified English learners. Again, for the 4 different clusters, I'll just focus on the late elementary cluster, grades 1 and 2, the blue line on the very top. You can see that there were already existing disparities, differences in average composite proficiency levels in 2018, estimated at 7.7 scale score points. But you can see the trend going up even before the pandemic, climbing up that disparity between the 2 subgroups, but then really jumping up from 10.5 to 13 and now at about 15 scale score points in 2024, the latest estimate. For the other grade level clusters, it's a little lower. Again, grade level clusters, I don't recommend comparing clusters with across each other because there is this principle of lower is faster, higher is slower, meaning that there is a higher range for English learners at early proficiency levels to grow. What I want to pay more attention in these graphs specifically because they are more descriptive is how the patterns change over time, and what you're seeing on your screen is, again, that disparities existed and they have increased after the pandemic, which is shown in that vertical dotted line after 2020. All right, so all of this was, I think, very informative. Again, based on a lot of data, I think it paints a consistent picture of what is going on with the overall trends, but we would like to do a little better. We would like to dive a little deeper into these averages and do a little more rigorous work trying to estimate some of these differences and disparities for different English learner subgroups, as well as examining and quantifying the impact of the pandemic on English learners' proficiency and disparities within various EL subgroups. There is a very limited amount of things that we can do with descriptive statistics, with tables. Just comparing Hispanic versus non-Hispanic students, that's 2 more tables. Regression analysis, which is what is used in the more inferential analysis as a part of my dissertation, enables us to simultaneously evaluate what those differences and disparities are for many different English learner subgroups and also controlling for many other potentially confounding factors that might distort average estimates. So the specific research questions that we're looking at, how has English learners' proficiency been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic in the context of or controlling for individual and institutional level factors? And I've listed here the individual level factors or variables, independent variables that enter the regression models here. We have students first, because we have the first time when the students take the test, we have how many years they've been an English learner and how many years they have been taking the access test. And based on that, whether they're a newcomer, meaning whether they're taking the test for the first time or not, or whether they're a long-term English learner, again, based on repeated taking of the access test. We have good data on students' ethnicity and race as far as it's being reported in the test forms that during the time of the administration. We have students' gender, IEP status, or individualized education plan status, indicating students' special needs or disability status. We have LIEP refusal, which indicates whether a student's family has refused supplementary LIEPs, English language program services in the school. We also have students' migrant status, as well as their age, based on which we can calculate, taking the difference from the cohort average age, a measure for SLIFE, or students limited or interrupted formal education in number of years, and then a bunch of intersection variables with the ethnicity variable, the Hispanic variable, which is one of the focuses of this study. In addition to the individual level factors, we have identifiers on state, district, and schools. So using some statistical techniques, we can sort of difference out or control for the effects that states, district, and schools have on the variation on the students' proficiency. That's research question 1. It's quite a mouthful, pretty simple, but just because of the number of independent variables that is included, it's a lot to consider. And then the second part of the question is just the same thing, but evaluating what the differences were and how they've changed after the pandemic. So basically repeating the same exercise pre and post pandemic and evaluating what that difference in the difference is. So those are the two main research questions that we're looking at. I won't go into too much into the literature. There is a lot of literature that I've reviewed. 3 main strands focus on English learners and disparities in outcomes as compared to non-English learners. There is a strand of literature on disparities for Hispanic students, and then there is accumulating evidence on how the COVID-19 pandemic has had a specifically large impact on English learners, but also on a differential impact on various subgroups of English learners. Because we're short on time, I'll just move forward to the theoretical framework that I've applied in this study. It's based on intersectionality, based on the legal studies of Kimberley Crenshaw. The main tenets of intersectionality are human lives cannot be reduced to single characteristics. Human experiences cannot be accurately understood by prioritizing one single factor. Social categories such as race, ethnicity, gender, class, sexuality, and ability are socially constructed and dynamic. They are inseparable and shaped by interacting and mutually constituting social processes and structures, which in turn are shaped by power and influenced by both time and place. And the most important of them all, the promotion of social justice and equity are paramount. So in this picture, which is a model, there is a lot going on, but at the same time, it's very simplified. In the very center, you see the status as an English learner, basically the dependent variable in this study, the scale score or the access proficiency level that the students receive that ends up defining whether they will be an English learner or not. And then a multitude of factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, language, refugee, immigrant status, disability, some of the things that are listed in that more central part of the chart are things that we can measure, arguably with arguable precision, let's say. And then there are I've listed a bunch of factors that are also very, very important, such as teachers, the role of teachers, parents, differences in assessments, the types and quantity and implementation of programs, very, very important, socioeconomic status, students' peers. All of those are very important factors, but perhaps ones that are more difficult or at times even impossible to really reliably measure and quantify. And then on the upper layers, you can see the state, district, and school levels that sort of intertwine and center the English learner status within all of those different state and district and school level policies and differences and rules and in implementation of their law. As social identities intersect and interact at the individual level, such as race or ethnicity or gender, experiences of those intersections are influenced by the larger nested interpersonal and structural systems of oppression. That's the framing of intersectionality that I think is very helpful in both evaluating the performance of English learners, but also evaluating the existing and exacerbated differences in the overall proficiency. A couple of more thoughts about this graphic. Everything is shown very symmetrical and proportional. In reality, it definitely doesn't look like this. Each English learner's collection of circumstances can be viewed as a unique configuration of these multi-level and multifaceted intertwined factors. And also time is missing from this picture. So this is a complex yet a simplified snapshot. But it's a good way to connect it to the empirical model and also the data that is being used to decompose variations in English learners' proficiency. You can see COVID-19 impacting each and every level, as well as the individual level and the aggregate levels. Again, in this slide, you can see in the gray area, those variables that we don't have a good measure on, but the ones that are depicted, they're depicted along with the appropriate intersection that is included in the empirical model and the analysis. So for example, we have variables on gender, we have data on gender, migrant status, race. We can take interactions and intersections of those variables, and what the strategy, empirical strategy is aiming to do is basically evaluate how big, if you will, each one of these little spaces are in predicting what's at the center, or in other words, English learner proficiency or status. All right, let's move forward. I put this together last year. I think it was a useful exercise, just things that I think predict who I am, or just things or categories or categories that I ascribe to. I think this is a useful exercise to do from time to time. I look at some of the things that I put here last year. I probably wouldn't have them here this year, but I think it is a useful exercise in trying to understand our intersectional nature as humans. All right, let's talk a little more about the data. It's a lot of data that I've analyzed, and there's a lot more with the 2024 being added. There is about 10 million total observations in the analytic sample, 5 levels. At the very top, we have 34 states. Only one is shown in this model. About 10,000 districts that are nested within the 34 states, 50,000 schools, 3.5 million unique English learners with their outcomes in 2017, 18, 22, 23. It's very different. It's different from student to student, with some intermittent missing observations. Students come back, drop out of EL status, they come back, they move states. There is a lot going on, but this is a very simplified model of what the data is looking like. Another list of the variables that are used in the regression model. My light goes off every once in a while, so I have to get up and move. Sorry about that. One of the things that I'm really excited about that I was able to do in this study is not only examine disparities across racial or ethnic categories, but take a look at the ethno-racial intersectionality of WIDA's English learners. So because we have so much data and pretty good data on students' racial and ethnic identification, we're able not only to look at, again, ethnicity or race, but we're able to look at the intersection of ethnicity and race. So what you're seeing here is an average representation of what the 14 different ethno-racial categories look like when we look at the entire population of WIDA's English learners. So about 2/3 of the population is reporting Hispanic, about 1/3 is non-Hispanic, But then in addition to that, as is done in questionnaires that ask you about ethnicity and race, kids indicate that they're Hispanic and white, about 30% of them, 0.2% report Hispanic and Asian. And just like that, there are 13 more categories with not Hispanic, no race reporting category being the baseline category against which the results are the results of average proficiency from these different subgroups are compared against. All right, moving forward, I won't spend time on these because I'm running short of time. These are the different kinds of models that were used to investigate the interdependencies and the correlations between these variables when using different kinds of configurations. The final model is a 5-level mixed effects model with state, district, school, student, and time nesting. This is what the specification looks like. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but using this mixed effects regression, we're able to decompose the variation in English learners' proficiency, and this is what it's looking like across those 4 different levels. So at the student level, 52% of the variation is explained by student variation or variation across time for given students. 9% is at the school level, 6% district level, 2% of the variation at the state level. And then we have another 30% that it's random or unexplained, perhaps attributable due to some of those factors that I mentioned that are either difficult or impossible really to measure reliably. So using all of these different regression models, we were able to see how these coefficients for different independent variables change across time. What we're really interested in is this last column that shows the final model, the 5-level mixed effects model, and it shows an average impact of COVID-19 of about 6.6 scale score points. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that really means and how big that is. And just very similarly, you can see the impact or the difference is estimated for the other variables if you go down this list. So for example, time as EL in years is estimated at 10 scale score points. This can be taken to mean that for each year an English learner is taking a test, there is a 10 score average increase in their overall proficiency. Likewise, if you look at the newcomer coefficient, -7, that shows that newcomer students compared to non-newcomer students are scoring about -7 or 7 scale score points behind or below their non-newcomer peers. Importantly, we can see that there are large differences for different categories of racial and ethnic identification. Just as an example, Asian non-Hispanic students, shown in the very first row of the race and ethnicity block, are reporting 15 scale scores higher compared to not Asian, not Hispanic students. And from all of these estimates in the very bottom, we can compute an average Hispanic disparity figure, which is estimated at about -4.3 scale score points. So comparing, for example, the impact of the pandemic at -6.6 scale score points to that of time as EL, it's about 2/3 of a year, the impact of the pandemic, if we want to put it into yearly language development terms, or if you want to compare the average Hispanic disparity for all races estimated at -4.5, almost 4.3 points, it's about 70% of the impact of the pandemic, so to speak. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the rest of this table, the interactions with Hispanic newcomer, Hispanic long-term EL. For some of these, for Hispanic females, this is the only variable for which the estimate is not statistically significant. I should have mentioned that perhaps a little earlier, that all of these estimates that I'm reporting are very highly statistically significant, except for those cases that are grayed out and italicized. And it's not a surprise because we have the entire population of students. So that's what enables us to do all of these more granular comparisons and at the same time maintain statistical precision. Oh, wow, we're 44 minutes already. Okay, so I said the impact of the pandemic was about 6.6 scale score points. We can look at it another way using your fixed effects. This is what that negative 6.6 scale score points looks like when we center everything on year 2017 using a fixed effects approach. You can see pre-pandemic, the estimates hovered about 2.5, 1.8, then we had this sharp decline of about 6 points, and we're still down there. The 2023 estimate implied a little bit of an increase as compared to the previous years, but as I showed you in those descriptive charts, the 2024 estimate, the regression analysis, I don't expect it to be much more different compared to the 2023 estimate, given what we're seeing in the average scale scores and average growth and average disparity numbers. This shows a comparison of pre and post-COVID disparities, how those disparities have changed, namely research question 2. One of the biggest things that has changed that I want to mention, newcomer students pre-pandemic were performing -8 scale score points worse compared to non-newcomers. That has changed. Newcomer students are performing much better, twice better compared to pre-pandemic, unless they are also Hispanic, which is given in that 6th row. You can see post-COVID, the orange bar is a little higher than the blue bar for the Hispanic newcomer students. Again, the same thing, showing pre and post disparities, pre and post pandemic. The orange dotted line shows, as compared to the blue dotted line, that the overall Hispanic disparity has increased by about 2 scale score points post-pandemic compared to pre-pandemic. And again, there are large differences by subgroup, by Asian, Black, African, mixed, multiple races, which are in turn broken down into Hispanic and non-Hispanic. All right, let's move forward. Some of the findings. I already talked about this, so I won't go into all of these implications. I think it's pretty obvious that we need more, better targeted, and more properly aligned resources and supports, enabling more conducive learning environments that are needed to address the growing disparities in proficiency outcomes for many English learner subgroups, specifically Hispanic English learners. We encourage states and districts to perform similar analysis in their local contexts, because what I've presented is WIDA average. I expect things to look different from place to place, from state to state, from district to district. So such analysis of decomposition of English learners' proficiency across subgroups are warranted to see where English learners, specific subgroups of English learners, may need additional and more supports. A lot of limitations and a lot of room for future research. I only talked about overall composite scale scores. The same exercise will be replicated for 4 domains separately: reading, speaking, listening, and writing. It's very interesting to see whether and how the pandemic has impacted domains differently, and how for different subgroups. Paper mode has not been included in this analysis. That's again for future research. We can do a lot more interactions and a lot more intersections, but that's all coming in the future. All right, I'll stop here.